New year, new truck. Hey everyone, Rich here from the RCNetwork.com, and today we have a fresh unboxing for 2020. Now, I'm a little bit late to the game on the Traxxas Maxx. Yes, this is their newest 1/10 scale 4-wheel drive monster truck, but nonetheless, I do want to unbox it here on video, give some of my thoughts and my initial impressions of this brand new vehicle from Traxxas, and of course, later on down the line in a future episode, we'll be checking it out on my local bash spot, and of course doing a full review of this thing down the line. So first off, you're checking out the color choice I chose, which is the blue and orange version, I believe. Comes in 3 different color options, so you can kind of choose which color scheme you want on your rig. And of course, the blue and orange just kind of appeal to me. On the flip side of the box, we are seeing a different color scheme, of course. Traxxas 4-wheel drive 4S, 16 plus volts, and 60 plus mile per hour potential speed. We'll go over kind of what this thing is capable of a little bit later on this video. Look at the side of the box here, of course, 4S power, completely new electronics that I have not seen before from Traxxas. We do have a self-righting feature that's kind of built into the remote. We do have the clipless body mounting, which I'm a pretty big fan of already. I already have this thing out of the box here, so I've already kind of checked that out. Of course, waterproof electronics, and finally, max strength, playing on the max name and 1/10 scale. Although I find this one to be a little bit more towards like a 1/9 scale. On the flip side, we are checking out some of the other features here. Of course, max all-terrain tires, smooth aluminum GT Max shocks. These shocks are nice. You do have fans on both the motor and the ESC. 16 volts of extreme power, of course, from the ESC. Max duty drivetrain. Looks like we have all steel gears there on the differentials. We do have a high torque servo. More on this a little bit later. As far as speed rating, this thing has 4 different speed ratings that it's capable of, and of course 3 different color options. I chose that orange and blue version. Now, as far as the speed, they do have a 40 plus, 45, 55 plus, and 60 plus mile per hour. The first 2 columns right here are using 3S LiPo. The second 2 is using 4S LiPo, so more voltage, more speed. And of course, the difference on the 2 columns is going to be the stock pinion versus an optional buy it separate speed pinion. And we'll kind of go over that in the running video of this series. Before we get to the star of the show, the Traxxas Maxx, here is some supplement items that come inside the box. A battery strap adjustment bar for running different sized LiPo batteries. A small toolkit that includes 2.5, 2.0 hex drivers, and of course a multi-wrench that has, I believe, 7mm and 8mm nut drivers. A warranty registration card. A full color Traxxas Maxx quick start guide that has great information inside. And finally, the included 2.4 gigahertz TQI top qualifier remote. This is actually a pretty nice remote, especially for an RTR. Has everything that you would want in an RTR radio, a great foam wheel right here. You do have a great throttle response up here. And of course, you do have trim levels for your steering, a multi-function dial for the TSM feature if your model is equipped with that. A couple of buttons up here for the menu and setting specific features of this remote. On the flip side, you do have a access panel to enable this remote to be controlled via Bluetooth and a smartphone. That's an item you'd have to purchase separately. And finally, this does run on 4 AA batteries that you'll have to supply yourself. And finally, the Traxxas Maxx. Now, first impressions on the Traxxas Maxx, it is quite impressive, and it's definitely a step into the future for a lot of RCs out there. Now, traditionally, once you get to this size, you pretty much have like a little aluminum chassis plate. It's basically based on like an 8-scale buggy or an 8-scale truggy. Now, with this thing, everything's kind of redone and re-engineered to give us the kind of future of RCs. And of course, the first thing to try and imagine is the size of this thing. So I'm going to mention some RCs that are similar in size, but give you like a plus or minus version of this vehicle compared to them. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, the Proline Pro MT 4x4. Now this thing uses similar size wheels and tires, similar power system, being that it's a 4S capable system, and of course the size, this one's actually a little bit bigger than that Pro MT. Now moving up a size to like an 8-scale traditional vehicle, of course the first thing that comes to my mind is the Tekno MT410. They say it's a 10 scale, it's actually an 8 scale. This one's just a little bit smaller. Now, of course, 2.8 inch wheels and tires for this. The MT410 uses 3.8, so a little bit bigger wheels and tires. And of course, that is an 8 scale platform capable of 4S to 6S, of course, if you want to run it on 6S. So that is the size difference between those two vehicles. Now, if we are talking RTRs, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the Arma Outcast and some of those vehicles, the Notorious. This one, of course, once again, is just a little bit smaller. Different wheels and tires, like I mentioned on the MT410 from Tekno, and of course, the power system on the Outcast and Notorious is a 1/8 scale or a 4S to 6S powered system. So that is going to be the main differences on the size between the Max and some of its rivals on the market. First off, looking at the wheels and tires right here, I was skeptical on these tires to begin with. The foams are just a little bit soft inside of here, but the actual tires are quite nice. They kind of have this kind of nice tread design right here. They're very grippy, especially for an RTR. So I'm already impressed with that. We'll have to see how it does, of course, in the running video. Now the wheels are a 6-spoke design, very modern as far as the way they look. And we'll go a little bit more onto the actual wheel hubs once I take one of these off and dive into the chassis. Now, one thing that I'm really impressed about this Traxxas Maxx is the actual body right here. They did a lot of work into engineering a body for the 21st or almost 22nd century. So this thing is pretty nice. And I've got to say, they've eliminated the use of body clips, which I'm already a fan of. Sign me up for that. So you'll notice a couple things on this. There is a reinforcement up here on the roof that is bolted to the inside of the body here. And that just allows for when you are skidding on your roof down the road, the body will last longer. So that's pretty nice. You do have roll bars back here, and these kind of act as a structure support for the body. One place that your body always rips is right down here. So they kind of eliminated that. And of course, over here on the far side, they do have another skid pad. So when you're sliding down the road on the roof and the bed of the truck, you're going to save that body a little bit more. Now we are seeing a couple of points right here with screws and some brackets, and we'll show you what that means a little bit here down the line. Two other features that I really like about the body is, of course, the front bumper that's mounted to the chassis and the rear bumper. That's just going to give you some additional protection on the very vulnerable parts of this body, the very ends. Now also down here you do have some rock sliders or some kind of Nerf bars right here, and the body actually slides into them. So once again, another protection for the body at its most vulnerable areas. Taking off the body is quite easy. Flip the switch right here and lift up this little dial. Everything's released now, so you can pretty much lift up the back end, pull it out from the front shock tower, and your body's off. With the body off, you're seeing all of that inner support structure. The little lip right here that goes into that front shock tower, all of the support structure that is part of the roll cage, it all bolts together and creates a very strong, unique design to this body. Now back here is the mechanism to actually release everything. And of course that is all supported back here on the bed structure up to the top here to give you those little landing pads when you're sliding down the road. Now earlier I was talking about a kind of futuristic design, and this is kind of what I was talking about. They've kind of done away with the traditional shock towers and that type of look from an RC. They've really kind of thought outside the box and given us this kind of unidirectional kind of front and rear of this. You'll notice that this is almost identical. So the rear, of course, and the front. The only thing that's going to change on the front end of this vehicle versus the rear is, of course, you'll have steering linkage and different ways to steer the front tires versus the rear. They're just fixed in place. We'll go over a little bit about the suspension components a little bit later. More unique features dive into the front suspension here, where you're using not only a lower A-arm, but also an upper A-arm design. Traditionally, you'll just see like a turnbuckle up here to keep everything straight. So a little bit more rigidity here with this upper A-arm design and lower A-arm design. Of course, you have steering knuckles right here and caster blocks to keep all of your different angles. And you do have fixed in position plastic turnbuckles for the steering. Really impressive are the Maxx's shocks. Now these things are aluminum bodied, huge 8-scale sized shocks. You do have plastic caps. You do have metal pivot balls, both the top and way down there on the bottom. These things are pretty nice and they're very plush just from moving it around on the bench. These things have quite a bit of travel and everything seems very, very smooth. The Traxxas Maxx uses universal drive shafts, both front and rear. They are plastic and telescoping and quite large. They're about between 9 and 10 millimeters in diameter, so a lot larger than you'd find like on a Traxxas Slash. With everything upside down now, a couple of things I wanted to point out as far as slight little upgrades on this vehicle. We do have metal hinge pin braces inside here on the back side of the A-arms and the front side of the A-arms. Now on the upper A-arms, there's also a brace only on the front side there. So you do have a little bit of things to keep everything in line when you are jumping this maybe a little bit further than you should. With full exposure to the underside of the Traxxas Maxx, you're seeing all of the different parts that kind of make up this vehicle. Of course, the front bulkhead right here, which is the 4 screws. You have the center bracing section right here with about 8 screws to remove this. And on the rear, once again, just 4 screws to remove that rear bottom brace to get to some of the internals. Looking at the electronics for the Maxx, let's start off with the motor. This is a 36 millimeter wide by 70 millimeter long canned motor. This is a 2400 kV sensorless motor with a built-in fan up top here, so everything is going to pretty much ride cool. Now, as far as the size, this is larger than you'd find in a traditional 550 canned motor. This has a little bit more length to it. Those are traditionally 36 by 60. This one is a 36 by 70. So you're going to get a little bit more torque out of this motor. And of course, 2400 kV will be paired perfectly with a 4S LiPo battery. Next is the VXL 4S ESC. This thing's huge. This is larger than any 8-scale 4S to 6S ESC that I've seen on the market. This, of course, is capable of 3S to 4S and has an internal BEC of 6.0 volts. It uses 6.5 millimeter bullet connectors and of course 10 gauge wire to keep everything running cool. Linking up here to the servo, this is the Traxxas 2090 servo. This thing is a little bit larger than traditional 1/10 scale or 1/8 scale servos, and it uses a proprietary mount. However, you can pick up a mounting bracket to mount in whatever servo you'd like to increase the amount of torque. Now, where they didn't skimp was the amount of torque. This thing has 285 ounce-inches of torque, which is probably one of the better equipped RTR servos on the market. It has a transit time a little bit slow at 0.18, but I think it'll get you going on day one and keep running quite a long time on this 1/10 scale platform. Finally, the receiver box is fully watertight. Traxxas does have one of the best waterproof receiver boxes on the market with plenty of gaskets and silicone seals and everything to keep the water out and your vehicle running the way you want it to run, controlled by your radio. Taking a look at the battery tray, it is quite long. This is actually longer than a traditional stick style pack. Laying it down here, you have a good another inch longer tray design. So if you were to run traditional batteries, you can kind of either move your battery forward or aft on the chassis to adjust the tuning of this thing. But with the Traxxas batteries, they're actually a little bit thinner and lower, but longer to fit inside this longer tray. Now, the unique tray design, you basically have a push mechanism. Push this to the side, lift it up, and it flips up out of the way. Now, what I mentioned in the supplement pack, you have an extra little strap right here to keep the Traxxas branded batteries down, whether you're running a 3S or a 4S, and I need to check out which one is for which. I didn't quite read on that yet. Looking at the rear suspension components of the Maxx, you have pretty much the same what I covered in the front. Now, of course, you don't have any steering components, so no steering linkages or those non-adjustable turnbuckles, but you do have the same upper A-arms and lower A-arms, which I believe are universal. You can use the same A-arm that is on the front, on the rear, and the upper on the front or rear also. And finally, rounding out the rear end, of course, is an included wheelie bar. It's a nice added thing, especially for these style of monster trucks, just to keep them down on the tires so they don't flip over. So nice added feature. on here on the Maxx. Well guys, that is my first look at the Traxxas Maxx. I can't wait to actually get this thing going and running. I'm waiting for the ground to dry up a little bit here in Southern California, just so I don't have much of a cleaning job to do afterwards. But once again, I will get a running review out of this thing here pretty quick. I definitely am curious to see how this thing does. I'm excited to test out this new platform and of course show you guys some great running footage and the final review of the Maxx here down the line. As always, if you have any comments or questions about this video or the products I discuss, please leave those comments down in the comment section down below. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, give this video a like. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you can be alerted every time I upload a video. And as always, my name is Rich. Thanks for watching.